Good afternoon and welcome back to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation, and we are continuing our journey to configure and go through the process of Human Resource module. So in my previous video, I actually started talking about the work action history. So if you don't know or if you haven't seen that video, make sure you go see that video because it helps you tie things together. So in earlier videos, I have actually started configuring the system. So I've gone through a whole cycle of how you configure and relevant things that you need to configure in order for this module to be functionable. And we started talking about some of the processes, and at that point is when you would start tying things together to the configuration. And worker action history is one part of it where I linked the worker action history piece with one of the configurations that we had done. So to make sure that you go through it and you kind of learn a lot about some of the business cases, some of my experience that I had gone through during my implementation. But today's video, we're going to only talk about employment history. So as you can tell, the employment history is basically a history of a specific employee. So if I were to select Beatrice here and I click on employment history, I expect the historical record of different employments Beatrice had for this company. So in this case, we see that Beatrice had an employment in DMF at one point, which overlaps an employment with USMF. In a real case scenario, you shouldn't have this, or you shouldn't be having an employee into two different legal entities. One reason being is the payroll. So sure, the system allows you to do that, but from a process, from a realistic point of view, you wouldn't have cases where this employee is being paid by two different legal entities. And that's what this means. So if you're employed in two different legal entities, that means part of your employment is being paid by USMF, the other part is being paid by DMF. And if you were to have this scenario in a real life, it will be a very messy scenario because I have seen that in my previous implementation where things started becoming super messy from a payroll perspective, from a business process perspective. And the simplest example that I can give you where I was running in trouble was even triggering a workflow. So this particular employee was part of an approval for purchases, and they were somehow migrated into the system through multiple legal entities, and the purchase and the workflow wouldn't get triggered. And we kept saying that this particular employee is enrolled into multiple legal entities, so that the system would just get tripped. We wouldn't know what to do and which environment to go into to send this notification of an approval. So in that case, you want to make sure that one employee, one employment, one active employment, and one legal entity. So always want to make sure that you convey that to your clients. And if you were to go deeper into this employment history, there's something called Date Manager. So very cool feature from an audit trail perspective. So if I click on Date Manager, you see there are two records here. So basically the idea here is that if I were to change any of these fields on an employee record, it will get logged. It doesn't tell you who changed it, but it does tell you when it became effective. So stay focused on the status as employed. When I click on 1/1/2020, you would see that the status employed is changed. So here you could see that it's none. So at one point, up until April 25th, the status was none. On April 25th, the status was changed to employed. And that goes for every single field. So no matter how many times you change any of these fields on an employee record, a new log automatically gets created. So that's the thing with the audit trail. So it's really helpful in that case that in these particular fields, if they're changing at any point, then they would be logged here. And you can go through that log to see when it was changed. Unfortunately, you wouldn't know who changed it. But in this case, it actually, if you look into view changes, I believe, oh no, unfortunately it doesn't. At one point I did see that there used to be a column here mentioning who changed it. but I don't see that anymore. So that's why I was thinking that it might have been the case where the auditor actually narrows down to which employee might have changed it or their users. But in any case, this is a lock that would allow you to track down the specific fields. Personally, I would have liked to have more than these fields because there's so much more in the employee form that frequently gets changed. But for now, what you have is basically this. If you click on employee details, so right now we don't have any changes that were made to employee details. But if you were to make any changes like the probation period, if you were to change that or introduce a probation period, a new log, effective log or effective date log gets created, similar to what you would see in employment details. And same thing with benefit detail. So any of these fields, if they're changed, if they're removed or whatnot, that gets logged into the system, and then you can always go back to it and see what was the previous value and what was the new value that was introduced. And if anything in terms of the discrepancy occurs, then of course you know that what you need to do. So basically revert it back to the original one. So with that, I think we kind of know now a little bit more of a functionality of human resources, and I think this functionality in terms of the employment history and the date manager is very useful. And for whatever is out of the box, obviously that is what we try to promote to our clients to stick to it. We don't want to customize it too much unless it's absolutely necessary. So with that, I'll close off our discussion for today, and then I will see you in the next video where we're going to talk about verify employment.